under his care, his watch, his guidance, and learning from that household. So what we learned was less about politics, as we know politics discussed today, much more about a love for the country, a love for people, fairness with people, respect, and love to be a Zambian, love for family, and to carry ourselves at all times, not as individuals, but as representatives of the family, representatives of the country. So even as we traveled out to school, he sent me to boarding school in England, the parting message was, don't forget where you come from. Don't forget from whom you come, which is the Banda family. So you grow up without realizing that it's politics, but with a full appreciation of what it takes to be a good politician, let me put it that way, who cares for the people and the country.
Well, I mean, you are a very successful woman. You come from a corporate space where you've left your mark. In fact, you've contributed greatly to our beloved country, Zambia. And one would really ask, why would you decide to venture, into a game that is considered by many as dirty, Madam Banda? Why politics?
Thank you, Andrew. That's a question I get a lot, and I think there's several reasons of why I decided to venture into this space. First of all, personally, I believe when you've been given an opportunity to get the kind of experience that I have received internally within Zambia, but also internationally. And I have worked largely in the development world with the International Finance Corporation at the World Bank, with British International Investments. Those sorts of institutions teach you about making an impact. So yes, we're doing finance, but we're doing finance for development, we're doing finance for impact, we're doing finance for poverty alleviation. So all of the work that I've done in my most influential years, I suppose I should say, I started with Barclays and Citi, is about making a difference. We come into this world, we see what is happening. I would like to think that for each caring Zambian who has the capacity, the willingness to do this, let's do it so that we have an opportunity to leave this country a better country than we found it. I was very influenced, as we spoke earlier, living in RB's house, as everybody called him, in that you really, really learned to love this country for what it is, but he also always told us, you have a responsibility to this country. This country has made you who you are and what you are, and therefore you also should try to give back. Leave a legacy that people can say so-and-so did X, Y, Z for this country. That's why politics. I also want to dispel this notion that politics is dirty. And it seemed to be associated much more with Africa in particular, our continent, other continents, yes, but Africa in particular, than with some other countries. So there must be something about the way we're doing it that makes it dirty. And my hope is that by coming into this world, leaving the corporate world, as you said, which I won't leave, as I said, I can go back. This is a timed intervention, if I can put it that way. You go back to the corporate world, but you have to come to a point where you feel, with all of the experience that I've had, what difference do I want to make? So there is that. There is also, for me, if you go back again to the founding mothers, we always say founding fathers, but there were women. There were the Mary Fulanos, there was the Mama Kankasas, I can't mention all of them. There was a Gwendolyn Coney. Gwendolyn Coney tried to run for president in those earlier days. Being around those sorts of people, not intimately, but by happenstance, gave me the confidence to say, I can do this. I want to leave that confidence to the next generation of male and female Zambians to say, it is okay for women to go into politics. It doesn't have to be dirty. We don't have to insult each other. Let's talk about the issues. Let's fight when we get into the Ebola in 90-minute step. When we get in there, it's about goals on issues. Shouldn't be about individuals or people and that kind of thing.
One of the comments that I came across the moment you you came out in the open that you would like to serve this country. Many people describe you to be very successful, but the only challenge they had was that you're a woman and that Zambia is not ready for a female president.
Yeah.
Do you feel in your heart of hearts that this country is ready for a female leader?
I do. And I think even if I didn't, Andrew, the fact that I have made the decision to do it will at least raise questions in those people amongst us, women and men, who feel that Zambia is not ready for a female president. What is it about being female that disqualifies you from wanting to be president of a country? And the last time I looked at the Constitution, there is nothing in there that says women cannot run for office. It says you have to be over 18, you have to have your grade 12, you have to be a Zambian citizen. And all of those I qualify. So I would love for us to start thinking about this as a Zambian woman who has entered politics, as a Zambian who has entered politics, who happens to be a woman. Same way you go to see your doctor.
Yep.
You're told you're going to see Dr. Mwansa. You don't know the gender of Dr. Mwansa. When you get there, you find doctor who happens to be a woman. And I think that is part of the messaging that I would like to send out there.
The Patriotic Front came on the scene with a very clear message that they want to ensure that people have more money in their pockets. They want the elections. Then the UPND came in office with a very clear message as well to fix the economy, and they had a very common phrase that Bali will fix it. And obviously every other politician comes with what they want to do in a tagline. What exactly, could we say about Dolika Banda? What exactly does she want to do when she comes into office?
I think Dolika Banda wants the country to go back and reflect on where we are. The economy is part of the problem that we have today. There is a social problem. We are losing our culture. We also have children who are on drugs. We've got so many other problems that talking about the economy in and of itself will not solve. So even as we have GDP 5.8% growth or 5.5 on the previous year, 2024, we still have children roaming the streets. We have street children having babies together in these drainage systems. We still have cholera. We still have people living, we have 60-70% of this population living under $5 a day. So we have those problems that we need to deal with. And for me, entering this space, that's exactly what drove me to this decision, is that I look at this country from the corporate world perspective, and I see a country that has all the natural resources that it needs to ensure that its people are not living under $5 a day, or the majority of its people. And I struggle with this conundrum that we are a very wealthy country, minerals, metals, all of the mining industry, natural flora and fauna, the valleys we have, the falls we have, and yet the majority of our people don't seem to be benefiting from that wealth. So mine is to try and close that gap, without making promises to people that I will put money in your pocket. Without making promises to people that the FX rate is going to be X, Y, Z. I cannot control those things. What I can hope to demonstrate and control is our mindset as a people. So, in terms of the principles of the economy, first of all, do we have an equitable economic infrastructure? How can we make sure that our economy is inclusive of the Zambian people? If I take construction and infrastructure, for example, we are not the ones designing.
Yep.
We are not the ones managing. We are the bricklayers. We are the painters. Why can we not have Zambian businesses employed to do those things in a fair and transparent way? So economic equitability for me as a principle. How do we lift the majority of our people and insert them into the economic cycle? That's the first principle. Second principle is how do we localize a lot of what we do, local ownership of businesses. Many businesses you go through in this country, they're not owned by Zambians. And I'm not saying Zambians should full throttle own everything in this country. We're an open country.
Yeah.
We invite everybody around, and we're a landlocked country anyway. So we have to work with whoever is coming into this country. But we must find a way to bring our people into ownership of major businesses. Restaurants. You show me any restaurant that you and I go to for lunch. There are a handful that we can say are owned by African Zambians. I don't mean, we have Zambians who have come and lived here for generations. I'm not discriminating against that. I just feel that the majority of our indigenous people are not getting local ownership.
How different is this message, Madam Dolika Banda? Because Zambians and millions of Zambians watching tonight have heard this type of message from politicians, and after that they gave them the vote. But we're where we are today, and we still speak of the fact that Zambia is endowed with so much natural resources, and there's a way that we can extract these resources to benefit the majority of Zambians. But that still seems to be a promise. How different is your messaging, and do you have a proper economic blueprint on how you intend to do all these things you're talking about?
I think it starts with our institutions. So first of all, when you say how different, I will counter that by saying, and I think it came from Einstein, I'll never get it right, but it's Einstein attributed to him. The height of insanity, or the epitome of insanity, is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. So promises have been made. We have to ask ourselves, and this is why I joined forces with John Sangwa. We spoke about this a little earlier before we started the interview, because it's about questioning us as Zambians. What responsibility and what role should we play in our own economy, in our own democracy? I left the corporate world, as you rightly said. I don't have a motivation here to start making my image. My image has been made. I am truly here to try and make a difference for the country. If the Zambian people accept that and want to experiment with a new leader who happens to be a woman, who happens to come from the corporate world, then I say, let's go for it. Let's try it. Let's try it. But we cannot continue to do the same thing.
Won't that be a gamble? Because we have someone from the corporate world who's president now. The Zambians said they've already tested someone from the corporate world?
There's a different combination, right? We've talked about a woman. There's a certain genetic makeup about women that make us compassionate about certain things. We focus on different areas of life. We are much more, I think, I'm not saying men are bad parents or whatever, but I think women are known to be the embracers of communities. So I think you have to look at the full package. You have to look at the full package. Not just coming from the corporate world, and therefore you have to look at the full package, the individual, the motivation, what made me come here, what made me do this. The background that I have, which you yourself have raised, is coming from a home where politics were about people. Whether you liked him or you didn't, for us, what he taught us as RB was people are the most important thing and asset that this country has. So I think you said, is it a gamble? It's always a gamble.
You earlier spoke of yes, the economic fundamentals are pointing in the right direction. If you look at inflation today, we're about 7.1% for the month of March into April now. If you look at our exchange rates, we are slightly above 19 kwacha, 18 ngweb to a dollar. If you look at our GDP, we are growing at an average of 5.4%, and it appears as if though everything is on the right track. Well, it doesn't appear everything is on the right track in terms of our fundamentals economically. What are you saying? Where is the mismatch here that you want to probably come and fix? Because the economy is growing in the right direction.
I'll use two indicators for the mismatch. You mentioned GDP. That's one indicator. There are two other indicators. The GNI, which is income. It's about income per person, per capita. GDP is production at the global level. It involves whichever big industries are in this country. The mining companies largely drive GDP. The GNI is about the income per person. That statistic has remained around 1,100, 1,200 kwacha per capita. So that the GNI is one. The Gini indicator index is another one, GINI. That one measures economic inequality. Zambia has been in the 55, 56 range for the last, 10 decades. 10 years or so. That indicator above 50 tells you that there is income inequality in the country. Those are the social indicators, and that is what's driving me. GDP growth, FX rate, whatever we can boast about, very, very nice, but it doesn't change the day-to-day life, the social impact on.
How do you change it?
Policies, first of all. Employment, quality employment for our people. Again, I use the example of construction, where we're not actually in the ownership in the SME industry, small medium enterprises. We are largely at the bottom of the pool. So for me, changing it is about looking at government policies in terms of developing skill sets amongst our people that make them at the higher level of employment, other than just sweeping the offices. Secondly, is developing the SME industry. That sector requires direct policies in terms of access to finance, in terms of offtake. Whatever they are doing has to be taken off, or the off-taker has got to be the equivalent in today's world of government, because they are the ones who are going to drive this policy. We have a lot of SMEs in this country, but they have no access to capital, and they have no access to business itself. They are usually overruled by big tenders from big companies, and very often not necessarily Zambian companies. So there are policies that you can make that can upgrade the economy. So for me, it is about encouraging local ownership, facilitating SME development, upskilling our people so that they can be in the higher levels of employment in any industry. So in construction, it's they're designing, the management, not just the buildings and so on and so forth.
Well, what message do you get about Zambia from the outside of this country? The president tells us that different presidents want to learn from him on how he's doing it. In fact, he's come up with the phrase that we are back in the Champions League as a country, and we are a mirror that every country is looking to learn on how we are doing things. Would you want us to get rid of such a president who's an inspiration to the continent and outside the continent?
That's a very broad statement you make, first of all, when you say the continent. It is not the whole continent that is saying that's the best student. Okay? But before I go there, I want to say one thing. For me, this is not about the president. This is about where we want this country to be next year, the year after, 3 generations from now. And there is a sense of urgency about it. You can look at this country from the outside. What you're looking for from the outside is opportunity to gain from what Zambia has to offer. You're not looking at the quality of life of the Zambian people. If I'm an outside investor, I'm looking to return the best shareholder I can the best shareholder return for my shareholders, who are not necessarily Zambians. So yes, from an outsider's perspective, if you're a mining company, if you're a tourism company, hospitality, if you're a pharmaceutical company, you're a manufacturer, you're looking at Zambia and you're saying this is a great opportunity. Today, block making is largely owned by the Turkish companies. I'm sure you've seen wherever we go. For them, it's a good opportunity. But they are looking at it from their outside and from their best interest. So that is fine. We need that. We need outside investors. We need that confidentiality. But my battle with the current, with the previous, because this has been a downward trajectory.
Yeah.
If you look at Zambia's GDP, or even the currency, back to 1965, 64, we were better than Singapore. We were performing better than Taiwan. We were performing better than Bangladesh. But if you look at the trajectory that has, in fact, it shouldn't have been called a trajectory because that implies an upward movement.
Yeah.
If you look at the trend of all the indicators, social, economic, currency, whichever way you look at it, it has been on a downward trend. And that's the problem that I'm trying to solve.
But he says, when he mentions that, he points to very specific things.
Yeah.
He says that the presidents from other African countries asked me how I have managed to implement free education, for example, how I'm able to take millions of kwachas, to every corner, of this country. They asked me about how I've managed to maneuver around debt restructuring. And so he's very specific when he's telling us Zambians things that his colleagues are telling him. Don't you think that this president surely has changed the entire game in terms of how the country is being run? In fact, he challenges you, the opposition, that there must be one opposition that must tell me what alternative they have to free education, what alternative they have to debt restructuring, what alternative they have, to CDF that now is at 40 million kwacha. What alternative do you have, Madam Banda?
I will say this again. Presidency is not in an individual. It is in a team that is running this country. So when we have these conversations, I want it to be very clear that I am not targeting an individual. I am targeting issues. I celebrate that the world, part of the world, thinks we're doing well. GDP 5.8% is better, that we're doing well. GDP is better than it was 2-3 years ago. It's still not where we needed to be in order to solve for the 66% who are living under, depending on which way you count it, $3 a day or $5 a day. $5 it goes higher, but for that percentage, we're still not solving for that equation. So for me, it is not about the individual. Yes, there have been successes. The debt restructuring has been very good for this country. We were at a standstill. Still not resolved, by the way. It's not fully concluded. I think you know that. It's not fully concluded. So there are certain things that, yes, we can compare that we have done better over the last, 4 years. But we're already coming from a low base, right? We're already coming from a low base. So for me, it is the forward-looking ambition. We can celebrate what we have celebrated. I do not take away from that. The challenge I have is I do not see that filtering down to the Zambian people. You talked about CDF, 40 million kwacha, right? We're at GDP almost 29 billion US dollars today. What is 40 million kwacha going to do? It's a drop in the ocean. Number one, it's a drop in the ocean. It doesn't change your life or my life. Even the life of my cousin who's living in Mukosi village at Mtenguleni, CDF has not changed her life. It's consumed the moment that it arrives. It doesn't build on anything. That's the first thing with CDF. The second thing with CDF is we should be using it to put assets in place rather than putting cash in people's hands. We should be using it, for example, in the village like in Chipata, which is what I know best, mangoes. Why can't we use CDF for the community? Rather than dishing it out individually and then it's directed from the top down, let the community or the district or the ward decide what we need most here. Is a plant with a solar light, very simple structure, where we can dry our mangoes, which become very nutritious. Otherwise they just go to waste, they rot right there. Why can't we do sewing machines? Why can't we do a vending center, welding center in some of these high density areas? Organize that properly. So CDF, brilliant idea, but one drop in the ocean. Two, the direction is not to asset building, it is to consumption. So those are the things I think we need to think about. How do we empower our people to be productive people? Free education, you talked about free education. Free education is nice. I'm a product of free education in those days. They paid a small fee Our parents paid a small fee, which I think is important as well, because then you're vested, right? You make sure your child is going to school, your child is passing, etc. But you've got to think about it with the full spectrum of what kind of education we need in this country. Now that it's free, we already had classrooms that had 50 children per teacher in one class. Now we've doubled that. Or it's gone from 50 to 75. In some cases, I've heard teachers telling me in Minwood that they have 120 students in class. So it's free in the sense that I can send my child and put them in a room. But is the teacher equipped to handle? Can we put technology into those classrooms?
But you agree that it's a good problem? That our classrooms are filled with pupils not being home but being in class?
You think that's a good problem?
I'm asking you.
I don't think it's a good problem at all. I think it is actually creating a future generation of students who, if I'm a teacher and I have to mark even 75 exercise books,
Per day.
humanly impossible. Humanly impossible. What am I going to do? And I have heard this being done, word to my face. They take an average. Teacher picks up this one, picks up the 25th page, picks up the 30th book, looks at the average, marks them. Teacher tells me, I know my top 10 students and I know the dullest in the class. I don't know the ones in between. I remember my teachers growing up because they had such an influence on me. But they had the time.
So what are you saying? Was this decision rush to implement free education at this time? And when you come into office, what will happen? Because as of today, I was seeing that there's a bill that has been taken to Parliament to make free education law. So it means that when you become president, unfortunately, you have no right to scrap it off. What is your plan in terms of education for our country?
I think first of all is to think about what kind of people do we want to have in this country, in our offices, in our industry, in our business from today. Start educating that population for the future of this country. So if you take China, for example, you take India, they educate their children for the country that they want to create 30 years from now. You can't do that on the current policy. So the first thing for me is to just overhaul our education system, because it's a system that we have inherited from pre-independence days. It doesn't serve us well today. So part of that policy change that we make has got to be what kind of skill sets are we bringing in, are we building for? Technology is extremely important. You can't do anything without your phone today. We all use the computers to do everything that we have today to do today. AI is coming down the pike. So free education, nice. But do you think our children, are you taking your child to a government school for free education? I'm assuming you have a child. Are you comfortable to take your child to a government school today with free education? No. You're not answering me, but the answer is
my child
no. Because the quality is not
He's just 11
good.
months, so...
That's why you have a proliferation of so-called private schools, some of which are, if you were really stringent about accreditation, the quality of education that kids are getting, they would not be able to be accredited. So we've got to overhaul the system. Just putting kids into classrooms, free or not, and remember they are mixed.
So hypothetically speaking, let's say it's August 2026 and you become president. When you say we need to overhaul the entire education system, what exactly do you mean? And what time frame are we looking at? And will you suspend what currently is prevailing?
No, you can't suspend an education system, right? I think one of the problems we have as a country is that very often when we come into office, we suspend or we reverse decisions that previous regimes have made, which means we have this start, stop and go, including infrastructural projects, whether it's the airport or hospitals, that has got to stop. So no, I'm not saying I would suspend the whole education system, but you start to introduce technology in the classroom. Teachers have to go for retraining. The private sector schools have got to be assessed according to a standard that we have set. If a child is going to be, if you're teaching grade 12, this is the minimum standard that you're supposed to have. And the schools have got to have a policy of what kind of graduates they're going to produce out there and what kind of children they're going to be producing into our system. So it's not a suspension, it's a gradual movement towards, again, it's renewal, right? It's a gradual movement towards improving what we have. When we buy a house, unless you have the money, which we also have budgetary constraints, right? You don't immediately redo the whole house. You say to yourself, next year we're going to have done this room, and so on and so on.
The biggest problem we have at the moment in our country, especially among the youth, is unemployment. The levels of unemployment are extremely high. What is your plan or blueprint for creating jobs?
First of all, I think government has a big role to play. Itself, as an employer, although it's not a majority employer, but it can employ directly and it can employ indirectly. Indirectly, a lot of our youth that we say are unemployed, a lot of them are very tech savvy. Data, we still keep data on paper in this country. It is time to move that stuff that's on paper onto a central database or whatever. You can employ children just in that sense. So you start to take them off the streets and give them some credible work to do. You can do that through government. Government can direct businesses to employ X% as long as they have the qualifications to be able to do that. We can have calling centers in this country. The English that is spoken in this country is better than many countries that I have visited, not just in Africa, but globally. Why don't we have call centers? Why don't we have technology backups? You pick up your phone, it's not working, you call a center of some sort, they'll walk you through and tell you this is what you need to do, X, Y, Z. I know a number of young kids who are creating fintech.
How many jobs are you looking at?
Youth is,
for example,
youth is today 67% of our population.
In first 5 years.
That promise I cannot make. Remember I said to you that I'm looking at the policy level. If I start to tell you I'm going to create 1 million jobs in 5 years, I'm making a promise.
The promise that has got a plan.
A promise that I might fail. I am calling on Zambian people to say the way we are going around life today, it's not going to work. It's not going to create the Zambia we want to live in the next 10 years. I'm not here to make promises to people. Because you'll be the same people who will turn around next year and say, oh, she lied to us. I'm here to challenge us as Zambians. What is our role? What is our role in resolving the issues of this country? It's not a job. The president cannot, in and of himself or herself, resolve the issues that we're having in this country.
Another problem that you'll be taught by the people, you go to Kalingalinga, Madam Banda isenjala kuno. Unga wa dula, salad ya dula, and everything is expensive. Do you have a plan on how you address the high cost of living?
The cost of living is a symptom. When we talk about FX rates, we talk about the cost of living, we talk about the education, the lack of good quality education. These are symptoms of the underlying problems. The underlying problem for me is for us to create an economy that allows Dolika Banda, Andrew Mwanza, to have adequate opportunity. Remember my first point, economic opportunity. Have adequate opportunity for as many Zambians as possible, certainly much more than we have now, to be able to make a living that can take care of the cost of living issues. So when you talk about small industries, you mentioned Kalingalinga. Block making. Why are we not encouraging those people to make blocks? Why are we not formalizing Kalingalinga? When you go there to do some welding, everybody is welding the same thing. Mbaula, gates, benches. Why can't we compartmentalize so that one is making the woodwork, another is doing the steel work, but it's an integrated system and it's an organized system. So there's a lot that goes by that we can actually formalize and make into industrial hubs. At the provincial level, for example, I take this example all the time. in the provinces. In the early days of the Founding Fathers, every province was analyzed to see what is its relative strength, what is its comparative strength compared to the other provinces in this country, and how do we bring the collective production of each area so that we elevate the country as a whole. So mining, Kaja, emeralds, that was demarcated years ago. Luangwa integrated in the valley for national parks. That was created just after independence.
So for that lady in Kalingalenga who is watching and says, millimil for me is expensive. It's costing over 200 kwacha. Is Madam Dolika Banda going to drop down the price of millimil?
Madam Dolika Banda cannot promise to drop the price of millimil down because it's a commodity. And a commodity, unless you want to go back to living in a controlled economy, right? Unless that's what we want, which I don't think that's what Zambians want.
So it's impossible for you to bring down the cost of the price?
No, I would rather think about this as increasing the incomes of people so that they can afford to buy the millimil.
But is it possible?
It is possible.
Why can't you do it if it's possible?
Why can't we do it?
Why can't you reduce the cost of living for it to be acceptable? And
we are already living, think about the cost of living. The majority of our people are living under $2 a day. You want me to reduce that to $1 a day? What kind of developing economy is that? I would rather look at how we create policies that increase people's incomes, for example, to $5 a day, so that they can afford the cost of living at $2 a day. But consistently bringing down the cost of living for people is not the answer to the bigger problem we have. By the way, Zambia needs to more than double its economy in order for our people to get below that $2. You know what $2 is? It's like 40 kwacha. What can you buy out of 40 kwacha? So you want me to reduce it even further to 20 kwacha?
Last week we did see the Energy Regulation Board get to review the prices of fuel at the pump, and we also saw the intervention. They increased, but we saw the interventions that government, made. Do you commend government for the interventions that they've made?
There are two ways of dealing with the issues that we face. We live, unfortunately, in a global world. That global world means we have to deal with domestic issues, but we have to deal with domestic issues in the context of global development. So the price of fuel, for example, right now, especially with Iran happening, we saw it with grain when Ukraine blew up. Those are things that are not in our control. Even the currency is not in our control. What is in our control is how we run this country. And how we run this country means also looking at wastage. Something that I wanted to say to you earlier is, even when you talk about somebody in Kalingalinga who says the cost of living is high, they still have money to do other things. They still have money to drink on Saturday and Sunday, sometimes even Monday. They still have money to buy weaves. They still have money to buy cell phones. There are people I know who have 3 cell phones, MTN, Airtel, Zamtel, in case one is not working. There are choices that we also have to make. Those are internal in our control. So number one, we have to look at the things that we can manage internally, so that even if the outside world is blowing up, at least we can maintain a level of dignity internally. That's internal management. Part of internal management is curbing corruption. Corruption is rife in this country at every level. And if we can just curb that, I do believe, Andrew, we can find enough of a cushion in our economy to help us deal with all these issues that you...
In the next few weeks, Madam Dolika Banda, Parliament will be dissolving. How prepared are you for this coming elections?
I wouldn't be sitting here if I hadn't made the assessment that I'm prepared. I would not be sitting here if I had not made that assessment. So prepared in what sense?
Number one, when you came on the scene, there were rumors that you were taking over Andy Ford Banda's political party. Whatever happened, perhaps you may tell us before we move to the next stage.
I think that's an old story now. Rather than dwell on the past, we learn from our mistakes. I would rather look forward and say what happens now. So that happened. We didn't come to an agreement. We didn't come to a meeting of the minds. And by the way, it wasn't me taking over Andy Ford's party. It was a collaboration that was supposed to happen between us, and it didn't work. But for me, it was okay. This has not worked.
Did it dribble you?
You can ask him that. I'm not prepared to answer that question. You can ask him that. Dribble is, I don't know, it's a bit of a loaded term, if I can put it that way.
Maybe I should put it bluntly.
What I can say
did he get your money and
thought we no. What happened is he always said his party was not for sale. And I always said I'm not about to pay anybody for a party. I don't understand why you should pay for a political party. It's about ideology. It's about values. It's about your dream and your mission for the country. It's not a commodity that is to be sold. Unfortunately, I think there is that mentality too rife in this country. So we have, I think, over 70 parties registered. Some of them we don't even know who.
Do you have a political party?
No, I do not. But we have joined. So after the PAC, let me say the PAC experience, you keep looking, you keep talking, and John Sangwa and myself were introduced, State Council, were introduced by mutual friends, said you two people think alike, can you think about coordinating on this? So we did collaborate, and we found each other of like mind, started the movement. It's public knowledge, the movement has now already filed its papers for a political party. So that is the party that I will be moving under. Yeah.
At the moment, you're facing challenges of registration with this political party, and time is running out. Do you have Plan B in an event that you don't manage to register the Movement for National Renewal?
Plan B for me is the Movement for National Renewal. It is a movement that was designed not just to get into politics. It's a movement that has been designed to make us think about, as a country, about where we are. I'm sure you've read the 10 points of the Movement for National Renewal. So that agenda for me continues. If we are able to register MNR, and I don't see why we shouldn't be able to, because we're following the laws and the regulations. If we are unable to do that, for me, I continue the work with the movement about awakening our people to their responsibility
so you
as
don't
citizens.
Think of, you not think of using a special purpose vehicle to get into these elections?
No. The special purpose vehicle like what?
Like another political party that you could use to get into these elections.
Look, this election for me is not about winning, about becoming a president. This election for me and my participation in this, becoming president is important because it allows you to accelerate your vision, your views, given the urgency of the situation. But this intervention for me was about getting into the fray to help our people discuss where the country is. And that's what the Movement for National Renewal is about. Let us discuss where the country is. Let us discuss personally how vested we are in this country, and personally, what are we prepared individually to do to make Zambia a better place than it is.
You had mentioned earlier that yours is to ensure that you leave impact, you know, at a national level like that, by joining politics. Would you accept an invitation by President Hakainde Hichilema to become his running mate?
That's conjecture, that's hypothetical, and I think the answer would come if the reach out was made. I can't answer that question for you right now because I have not been asked.
Is this something that you could entertain?
I think it's very much about whether he would be interested. It's very much about whether we are like-minded. It's very much about whether the policies would be aligned. It's very much about whether our vision for the country is on the same table. So I cannot categorically tell you, yes, I would, or no, I would not.
Others have suggested that it's practically impossible to unseat this current establishment in the form that the opposition is in. You are in disarray, you are not organized, and you're not ready for the election. This is what others say. From your perspective, do you think it's possible to unseat the UPND in this next election?
I think that is the decision of the Zambian people, number one. Number two, I don't think there are 10 crazy people running around spending money, spending time, spending energy on something that they think is not attainable. So for the opposition parties, yes, they may seem to be in disarray, but we don't know. Some are talking to each other to see how they can come together. We've seen some of it in the public space. It is possible. In Kaunda's days, they would have told you 1991 was impossible. He had complete control of this country. The Zambian people said enough. When MMD came into power, people thought it was impossible. The Zambian people said, no, it is time. When UPND came into power, people thought it was impossible.
Is the movement speaking to other political players for a possible alliance?
We are all speaking to each other. We are all speaking to each other for ideas, not necessarily always for alliances, just for ideas, for sharing what we feel about the country. Yes, of course. It's a small country anyway. You can't afford, you can't not bump into other opposition parties. In many cases, we know each other. You know, yeah.
I'd like for you to speak to the Zambians tonight. I'll give you a minute to address the Zambians. Why must we change government, if we must, in the next few months, and why must it be you to take over that seat?
So I believe that Zambia can be a better country than it is today for the majority of our people. I believe that our focus going forward must be on building the Zambian people, allowing ownership, asset build, capital access to ordinary Zambians so that they can become equal partners in an inclusive economy that gives them an opportunity to move up on the social mobility ladder. We cannot continue to have our people living the way that they do in a country that is as wealthy as this country is today. And so I believe it is time for us to challenge ourselves as Zambians in the way that I have challenged myself. But what part are we playing in making sure that we uplift this country, we uplift each other? What do we need to get rid of? We need to get rid of the drugs situation in this country. It's spoiled a full generation plus. We need to get our priorities right. And I know that some of us have, but the majority of us have got to make those decisions. We need to stop relying on government to resolve our problems. Gava yanganeko. We create problems and then we say Gava yanganeko. So for me, it is not about criticizing this government, Zambian people, because where we are today has been a trend that has happened over decades. And at a certain point, muntu kakula, you ask yourself, do I want to continue to live my life in this manner? And I came to the decision of, as a Zambian, I cannot accept that this country must continue to be living in this manner over decades. So what does the next trajectory look like? That's what this is about. And that is my message to the Zambian people. It is our responsibility to ourselves today, but to our future generations, more importantly.
Madam Dolika Banda, I wish you all the best ahead of the elections.
Thank you very much.
Even when we are happy as a family, there is just that important family member missing. Hence, we had to do just the right thing. When we are sharing a meal, there is just that important part of the meal missing.